Yeah.
So I emailed it. That's what I saw.
Folks, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you to today's Brownbag. As always, I have a few things to go over some upcoming events before I introduce our speaker for today. We have on Thursday coming in the Russian National Orchestra. I don't know if you've all gotten tickets or what. They're going to be at the Lead Center, a 7:30 concert. Before that, we've actually organized a pre-performance lecture on the history of the Russian National Orchestra, the popularity of Tchaikovsky, and a few other things. That's going to be given by Lisa Mullinger from the KU School of Music, and she's done a lot of research in this area. That starts at 6 o'clock, and you're welcome to join us. That's going to be at the Seymour Gallery in the Lead Center. So even if you don't get the performance afterwards, you can come to that lecture. We're hoping the weather is going to hold for that. And then the following day on Friday, we have actually two movies. We're going to have a regular Friday night at the Kino here. We're going to be showing a Kazakh film called Aksuat. That's going to be at 7 p.m. Here we'll have treats, popcorn, and whatnot for you. And then also we're starting something at the Edwards campus up in Kansas City. We're going to have Tatiana Scandal is going to be introducing a series. She's going to do a new movie every, like the first Friday of every month. And so she's starting that out with a film called Prabulka, or The Stroll. And that's going to be at 6 p.m. It's going to be in the Rainier Center, room 150. I'll have the information if you're interested. Our speaker today is David Trimbach. He is a PhD student in human geography here at KU. He has his, in the U.S., I had to look this up, a master's in urban studies from Portland State University. We've already discovered there's some linkages here. And his research interests include citizenship geography, borderlands, Baltic geopolitics, and political inclusion. We have very few lectures really that focus on the Baltics, and so we're very happy to have him in today to talk to us about Estonian citizenship policy.
All right, well, thank you, Bart, for the introduction. My name is David Trimbach, and I am a student here at KU, and I'm going to talk about the Estonian singing revolution and its relationship with Estonian citizenship policy. Here's a brief outline of what I intend to cover, like why am I interested in this kind of esoteric topic. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean by citizenship and citizenship geography, a little bit about Estonia, singing revolution, the political movements that came out of the singing revolution, and how that led to the restoration of Estonian independence, and later the citizenship policy, and then the policy ramifications, specifically the ramifications for the Russian-speaking population in Estonia. So a little bit about how I got interested. It started in Chicago. I had the fortunate opportunity to teach citizenship to Russian speakers at a nonprofit organization. And it was through that experience that I really learned how complex and messy citizenship is as a concept and as an idea, as this like political construct. And you really realize that it's not just voting and passports, it's something that's really precious and something that most people don't really think about every day unless you don't have it. And I also, at the same time, learned about the various citizenship policies that were implemented in the former Soviet Union, specifically in Latvia and Estonia. And talking to my students, I really realized that this group of people felt as if that they were persecuted following the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And that's what propelled them to come to the United States and seek citizenship in the United States. And so I started to read about it, I started to look up stuff online. I wasn't a student at the time, and I decided to go there. And so I went to Estonia, and I studied Russian at Tallinn University, and I talked to people about citizenship policy, and it happened that at the same time my Russian professor actually had a great passport, and he was not a citizen. He was born and raised in Estonia, he spoke Estonian and Russian fluently, but he was not a citizen. And so those conversations that I had there led me to pursue my PhD here at KU, studying these issues. So what do I mean by citizenship? So citizenship is a very complex and messy concept. It dates back to antiquity. Its origins are in the Greek language. But as a modern concept, it dates to the French Revolution. And it was during the French Revolution that there was this separation between citizenship and property ownership. Because before the French Revolution, citizenship was meant for a landed aristocracy. And the French Revolution really divorced citizenship from property ownership. And that's when citizenship became this idea of legal and political equality, that people in a community are all politically and legally equal and have equal access to political process. And as a concept, it consists of two enmeshed-like aspects. You can't have one without the other. There's this formal aspect that is the status that the state provides its residents. And it's a status that has both a bundle of rights and a bundle of obligations. You can't have rights without obligations. So you can have a right to vote or a right to health care, but you also have an obligation of paying taxes. Or in some states, it is required to vote, or there's compulsory military service. And in the same sense, that there is also this substantive aspect. And so by substantive, I mean citizenship is an action, and it is also a recognition. So you can act as a citizen, and also the state and society recognizes you as a citizen as well. You can have one without the other, but and that's actually what a lot of people study, is people who have a status, and there are loads of examples of marginalized populations who have citizenship, but they can't act or be recognized as a citizen because they are marginalized already within that society. And in citizenship geography, one of the main topics is the spatiality of citizenship. So the idea that there are spatial influences on citizenship practices and perceptions. At the same time, there's also this idea that citizenship is spatially rooted, and that citizenship takes place in place, and that it can be differentiated by spaces or differentiated by scales, that there is this multi-scalar idea of citizenship. And for me, I'm really interested in how citizenship is produced, reproduced, and contested by various social agents or political entities. Also the idea that citizenship is bound to power in political processes. And I put this quote up here just because it's one of those things that you see in almost every citizenship studies article, and it is, citizenship is the relationship between people and their government. It is the relationship between the nation and the state. It's what connects the two. And so I decided to study Estonia, and Estonia is the case study within how I approach citizenship. And so this is just some geographic trivia of what I personally associate with Estonia, just to set the scene, I guess. So Estonia is its own independent nation state. It's part of the EU. It's part of the Eurozone. It's part of NATO. It is the most wired, or rather wireless, nation state in the world. It is the birthplace of Skype, something that lots of us use on a daily basis. It has one of the largest oil shales in Europe. It has been using and producing electricity from oil shale for over 100 years, and most processes and technologies come from Estonia in the use of oil shale. It also has a long history of song festivals. That is the National Song Festival grounds in Tallinn. And every 5 years is Laulupidu, which is the National Song Festival. And this tradition dates back to the mid-19th century. Song festival traditions were brought to Estonia from Baltic Germans. And this tradition was incorporated into both Estonian and Latvian cultures. And so there is this strong tradition of everybody in a society learning the same songs and coming together traditionally during harvest time and singing together. Estonia is also made up of 14 counties, and it even has its own version of American Idol. It's about the same size as New Hampshire and Vermont combined, to give you some comparison. Its population is 1.3 million, about 68% are ethnic Estonians, Estonian speakers, while about 28% are Russian speaking, and that includes Russians and Ukrainians and Belarusians who use Russian as their primary language. It has an official language, which is Estonian. One of my professors over the summer called it modern Finnish, as opposed to ancient Estonian. It does have recognized regional languages, and of course a large portion of the population speaks Russian. In talking about Estonia, it's really difficult to fall into this trap of calling it a Baltic state, because Estonians themselves do not like that term. They don't really consider themselves a Baltic state. They consider themselves a Nordic state. They see themselves as separate from Latvia and Lithuania, even though they have a shared history and a lot of shared cultural traditions. And it also has a very long history of being occupied by other populations and other geopolitical powers, including the Danes, Swedes, Russians, Germans, Nazis, Soviets. It did have a brief period of independence following between the two world wars, and then it was occupied by the Soviet Union until 1991. And it's in this context that I wanted to show this video for those of you who missed out on your Estonian history classes. So we have the Danes coming in, we have no more Catholicism, we have serfdom, we have independence, someone says no independence, we have some Soviet housing blocks, and we have the singing revolution.
Like history.
And this is a book series actually produced by the Estonian government on Estonian history in the English language. And so today I'm going to talk about the singing revolution, or Laulevrevolutsioon. So a lot was happening, obviously, in the 1980s in the Soviet Union. There were a lot of reforms that were implemented by Gorbachev. There was also the 1980 Olympics, which also took place in Tallinn. I feel like a lot of people forget that. A lot of the water events happened in Tallinn. We also have Propeller.
That one, didn't we? We boycotted that one.
Yes, we did boycott that one. And we have the Estonian rock band Propeller coming out. And we also had a lot of reforms, and these are some of the reforms. And these reforms impacted the Baltic states in a different way, I feel like, than a lot of the other Soviet republics. And one of the ways in which it impacted them differently is that they started to talk about issues that had long been taboo and went against traditional, the traditional historical narrative of how the Baltics became part of the Soviet Union, which was that these nation states freely and electively joined the Soviet Union, which was not true. And people started to talk about them not just in their kitchens, but actually on the street. People started to get together and talk about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which was this secret protocol that really wasn't that secret, that was made in 1938 between the Nazis and the Soviets, that said, here are our spheres of influence and our spheres of potential territorial annexation. And after World War II, the Soviet Union did occupy and annex the Baltic states into the Soviet Union. And so people started talking about these issues. People started to protest these issues. People saw this as a foundation to seek secession from the Soviet Union. And so people started to have nonviolent protests. And these protests got bigger and bigger, especially in Tartu and Tallinn. And over time, people started to incorporate this long tradition of collective singing. So why not? This is something that we all know. It's something that connects us all as a national community. And so people started to sing traditional and national songs, some that had been banned during Soviet times, some that hadn't been banned during Soviet times. And over time, people started to write new nationalist songs, which was entirely new. Songs about seceding from the Soviet Union, songs about independence. And I just put this up here that there were no deaths in Estonia during the singing revolution. However, there were deaths in Latvia and Lithuania during this time period. But I feel like it's just amazing that there was this revolution and there was no death whatsoever. And so eventually these singing protests grew bigger, and more people started to gather. And over time, this kind of developed and evolved into political action and the development of real organized political movements. And there were two movements that came out of the singing revolution, both with the similar goal, with the same goal of independence. They wanted independence, but they had very different methods and philosophies behind them. One was the Estonian Popular Front, and a lot of former Soviet republics had popular fronts that actually sought independence or autonomy during this same time period. But Estonia is unique in that it had this other organization called the Estonian Citizens Committees, which was a more ethnic Estonian base and more nationalist. And there was another movement that existed at the time called Interfront, which later changed its name to Intermovement, and that was a more Russian-speaking dominated movement that sought to keep the territorial integrity of the former Soviet Union. And there was the largest protest happened in 1988, and it was at the Tallinn National Singing Grounds. over 300,000 people came, which was 1/4 of the population, which is kind of hard to believe if 1/4 of our population, gathered in Washington, D.C. to protest. It's kind of unbelievable. And to give like a feeling of some of the songs and the music that was coming out from the Singing Revolution, I chose this song, Koit, which means dawn, by Tonis Magi. He was actually a really famous singer in the Soviet Union. He actually sang the theme song for the 1980 Olympics. 8 years later, he wrote a song about Estonia seceding from the Soviet Union. And this was at the 2008 National Song Festival. And it has like a military feel, I feel like. So just to give you like a feel of the type of music that was coming out, and the song is about it being dawn for the Estonian people, and that it is their time to seek independence and be an independent country. And during the same song festival, the crowd was so riled up that they called him out to sing it again at the end of the night. You can actually watch all of these videos on the Singing Festival's website. Anyway, but how does this have to do with citizenship policy? So these two movements came out of the Singing Revolution. The EPF and the ECCs, they had the shared goal of independence or autonomy. They both had very different methods and philosophies, and a lot of the members overlapped. There was a lot of collaboration between the two groups. But the Estonian Popular Front was actually based on seeking independence based on using Soviet institutions and political processes. So using Soviet laws, using the Soviet government to seek secession. So using those things that already existed. While the Estonian Citizens Committees had a very different philosophy, and this philosophy was, is known as national continuity and restorationism, which means that they considered the Soviet Union an illegal occupier, all Soviet institutions illegal and illegitimate, and all Soviet citizens in the citizenship policy also illegal and illegitimate. And so in order to gain independence, the ECCs decided to first create their own citizenry separate from that of the Soviet Union, and with that citizenry hold their own elections separate from the Soviet elections, and create their own legislative body known as the Congress of Estonia, which is completely separate from any institution in the Soviet Union. And they did that, which is kind of unbelievable. They registered any pre-Soviet citizen, so anyone who lived in the Soviet Union prior to 1940 and their descendants. And they even had like little cards. They had this national campaign to register all true Estonian citizens. And at the same time, around the same time, the Estonian Popular Front became extremely popular with both ethnic Estonians and ethnic Russians. And the EPF was very inclusive of non-Estonians, and the EPF's leader, Edgar Savisaar, at the time, who was actually the current mayor of Tallinn, he promised citizenship, actually, to Russian-speaking population. And so lots of people were on board. It brought a lot of people to the table. And so in 1990, there were two working parliaments, both considering themselves the legitimate and legal political entities in Estonia, it was just mind-blowing to me. And independence came in 1991, and we have these two movements, and we have these very different political narratives and very different potential political trajectories of where Estonia could go. And within days of independence, there was a coup in Moscow, as many of us know, and the popularity of the EPF decreased. People considered Russian speakers in Estonia as a potential fifth column and as a potential threat to actual independence. And so popularity shifted, and the ECCs gained the majority of support, and as a result, the philosophy of legal restorationism and the idea that only pre-Soviet citizens are the true citizens really came to fruition at the end. And so Estonian citizenship became based on restorationism. So Estonia was legally restored as a nation state, and its citizenship was also legally restored. And these are the three types of citizenship policy, or different ways of looking at citizenship. We in the United States have jus soli and jus domicili, and there's also jus sanguis. So jus soli refers to citizenship based on being born on land, right? Being born in a territory. Jus domicili refers to naturalization. So you go through a process, you live in a place for a period of time, and because you live in a place, you become a citizen over time. And then jus sanguis is actually, it's based on blood, ethnic blood relation. So, and Estonia is not the only country that has this. Germany is probably the most famous case study in which this is the dominant form of citizenship. And in Estonia, they do have jus domicili as well. You can become a citizen over time. So when this happened, when the new Estonian state restored itself, and at the same time they also reinstituted the 1938 citizenship law, which was based on jus sanguis, so citizenship through blood, which also at the same time revocated or took citizenship away by annulling it, 500,000 Russian speakers, which is about I don't know, almost one-fourth of the population. So in an instant, a large portion of the population was politically disenfranchised and couldn't really participate in political process. Because no citizenship equals no political rights. So just to give you a sense, like before the occupation, about 5 to 8% of the total population were Russian-speaking, and in 1991, about 30%. So in the early 90s, there was this real push by some nationalist Estonian politicians to migrate. They really wanted people to migrate because this was our country, we got our country back. And if not, then assimilate and go through naturalization process. However, at the same time, there was instituted a 3-year waiting period to naturalize, which may not seem like a long time, but when a nation state is just starting, and there's nation building happening, and there's a lot of, like, you're rebuilding a country, you're rebuilding a constitution, so many different policies are being developed. And so a 3-year waiting period also meant a 3-year waiting period in which a large portion of the population didn't have a voice in any of those processes. And as a result, there has been this serious delay in political understanding and political savvy, the development of political organizations and parties, and there really is a mistrust in democracy and political process even today. And it's left a very it's left a really bad legacy. And during the same time period in which no immigrants, or people who are considered immigrants now, involved in the development of new policies, specifically citizenship policy, this same time period came out the 1995 citizenship law, which was considered at the time one of the harshest citizenship policies within Europe. And it received a lot of condemnation by the EU and a lot of human rights organizations. And since then, it has been amended numerous times. And it is a lot easier to become a citizen if you are if you have an intellectual disability or if you are a senior citizen past a certain age. But this law, the 1995 law, still has some of the strictest naturalization policies in the world, which is why people like me study it, because it is really interesting. And they're difficult in the sense that it has a language element or component in which you have to be near proficient, like native speaker, which for a lot of Russian speakers in Estonia, who for the vast majority are older adults, it's going to be impossible. And this is exacerbated by already existing from Soviet times language and ethnic spatial segregation. And as a result, a lot of Russian speakers have migrated. There was actually a Fulbright fellow from Russia here last semester who was an Estonian Russian speaker. And her family left Estonia in 1991 because her family felt persecuted. And it was really interesting meeting her. Some people have obtained Estonian citizenship, but these are mostly high-income and highly educated individuals. A lot of people have opted to obtain Russian citizenship but stay in Estonia because of quality of life issues. But most people, more than 50% of the population of Russian speakers, have permanent or temporary residency. And this has influenced the already widening social health, quality of life, economic and political gaps between the two populations. Estonia has one of the lowest rates of interethnic marriage and interethnic communication and interaction. Most Estonians do not interact with Russians on a daily basis. And this is what A.P. Berg, who is a political geographer from Estonia, calls an ethnic state with a divided society. And these policies have led to some unrest and some divisiveness. It's very difficult for me, even though this is what I study, to go to Estonia and actually talk to people about it, even with professors or academics. It's kind of taboo. And so I was just going to talk about two examples of unrest. So one was a failed autonomy campaign in Ida-Viru County, which is the county in the northeastern region of Estonia that borders Russia. In the early 1990s, as a direct result of citizenship policy, the city councils of Narva and Salamai decided to hold a referendum on autonomy, because they considered the citizenship policy as taking away their rights, and so by gaining autonomy, they could get some of these rights back. And these are two communities that have very large Russian-speaking populations. And so they held this referendum. It was successful in the sense that over 50% of the population participated, and over 90% of the population decided that they did want autonomy. But it was declared unconstitutional by the Estonian government, and the whole concept of regional autonomy was completely dropped. However, this part of Estonia has become this internal other region in Estonia. It is very different there. It is one of the most economically depressed regions in Estonia. One of them has probably the highest level of political corruption in Estonia. It's sort of this place that if you say you want to go to this region, Estonians really look at you like you're crazy. Why would anybody go there? But for me, it's a really fascinating place. And another issue, directly or indirectly related, is the Bronze Soldier riots, or the Bronze Knights. And this happened in 2007, and these were a series of riots that happened because this specific Soviet monument was moved from a more central location in Tallinn to kind of like a obscure military cemetery in Tallinn. And this had been in the center of the city for a very long time, and Russian-speaking community, they lay flowers at this monument. And people have attachment to place, and they have attachment to monuments. It's part of collective history and collective traditions. And this monument was moved by the government, really with no Russian-speaking input on the potential consequences of the monument being moved. And when it was moved, it led to protests, specifically in Tallinn. But I do know that there are riots outside of the Estonian embassy in Moscow as well at the same time. Over 1,000 people were arrested, and one person did die, which is, really unfortunate. So in conclusion, I hope that a lot of you learn that Estonia is complex and it's messy and it's fun to study. citizenship is all about power. Be aware of your own citizenship because it is something that most people don't think about unless you don't have it, unless you're pursuing it. And that the Baltics are way more interesting than you think. And this kind of ties in, all of this stuff kind of ties into my dissertation, and I'll be taking my comps at the end of the semester. And I'm going to be looking at the relationship between the contentious Estonian-Russian border region and how it impacts perceptions and practices of citizenship in Narva. So, thank you.